Do AAR and CFR work when users roam? We tested AAR by setting the bandwidth between the Winnipeg 602 and Halifax 696 locations to 8 kilobits per second, not enough for even one call. Same thing for Winnipeg 602 and Montreal 57. Note, we had all kinds of issues when testing where changes to bandwidth were not properly applied to the running configuration. Be careful when testing. We tested AAR by calling from Winnipeg to a Halifax phone with no roaming. It works. We see the network busy rerouting alert. We change the message from out of bandwidth to network busy. The latter is easier to explain to users. We tested AAR for Chloe's roaming EM profile by calling from Winnipeg to Chloe's EM profile in Halifax. This works great. See the network busy rerouting message. Even the remote destination rang. Same thing for Chloe's CIPC. There used to be a bug where AAR didn't work if the called line had an associated remote destination. Everything works with 9.1.2. We did find that CFR didn't work when a remote destination was configured. We opened a attack case for that. AAR works for calls from Chloe's EM profile in Halifax to Winnipeg 602-4001. The call is routed out the Halifax gateway to 91-204-555-4001. AAR works for calls from Chloe's EM profile to Montreal 57-36002. The call is routed out the Halifax gateway to 91-514-579-6002. See the network busy rerouting message? Unfortunately, calls from Montreal 57-36002 to Chloe's EM fail. We get a network busy message, but no rerouting. What's going on? The reason for this message is that the Montreal 57-36002 is trying to use its own gateway in Montreal to call Chloe's EM profile with the long distance number 1-514-579-6001. Even if we could hairpin the call, we end up with the same problem. The Montreal gateway doesn't have the bandwidth to reach Chloe in Halifax. This is not fixable. Don't worry, it doesn't happen often, and we can't fix everything. Chloe's CIPC behaves the same way as her EM profile. Users don't configure AAR themselves, so we don't worry about indicating Halifax or Montreal. We put AAR in the table as works because it mostly does. What about CFR? Remember, we abandoned using CFR for the WAN failure scenario in our call forwarding drawing. We call forward unregistered Chloe's CIPC to the local Montreal 10-digit number 514-460-0000. When we dial Chloe's CIPC at 8-573-6001, the local Montreal 10-digit number 514-460-0000 rings. CFR and roaming don't really go together. An unregistered device is not roaming. We did this test without having a remote destination configured. What about CFR if we have a remote destination configured? We configured the long-distance number 1-722-555-0000 as the remote destination to see what would happen. The long-distance number 1-722-555-000 rings, but not the CFR destination. CFR doesn't work when a remote destination is configured. We opened a TAC case and were referred to unfixed bug CSC TG43998. CFRU looks like a typo and should probably be CFR. CFR is broken when a remote destination is configured. That's not such an important issue as it's uncommon and we are still ringing a line. We'll put this in the table as works. We always send 10-digit caller ID. The caller ID will be the same for calls from Chloe's roaming devices as it is at the home location Montreal. This may or may not work out, depending upon the gateway at the roaming site. It's probably a bad thing for 911 calls. We'll look at this in the next drawing. This is the completed table. We put the caller ID entries in orange because there are issues. What should we do with all these results? Remember our objectives for the dial plan from the discussion in Dial Plan Overview. In this drawing, we focused on the final objective: users can be mobile. If users log into a site, then all dialing, internal and external, from call lists and call forwarding as well, works just like it does at that site. Here are the results from our deployment. We don't want to have to explain this to users. We have a number of issues. Calling from Chloe's roaming CIPC and EM profiles works like at the remote site. That means speed dials and call lists configured with site-abbreviated 7 and 10-digit numbers won't work. Forwarding from Chloe's CIPC works like at the home site, not the roaming site. We opened a TAC case, but think it's unlikely that this will change. There's nothing we can do about this. Forwarding from Chloe's EM profile. Forwarding to site-abbreviated numbers works like at the home site. Forwarding to 7-digit numbers works like at the roaming site. Forwarding to 10-digit local numbers does not work at all. And Mobile Connect does not work for 10-digit numbers. In all cases, caller ID is the 10-digit local Montreal number. This is not a huge issue for most calls. It's a bad thing for 911 calls. Our objectives and the results from our deployment do not match. The results from our deployment will be difficult to explain to users. What should we do? Can we change the dial plan hierarchy to fix this? It's the 10-digit site-specific local patterns that give us the most grief. Sure we can. We'll point our local 10-digit patterns to their local gateways using the XXX PSTN gateway route lists we created for AAR in our call forwarding drawing. Here are the results of this change. This is a much better result. The fact that global calls are forwarded out the Halifax gateway doesn't really matter to users. Here are the results when the line we are calling is shared by Chloe's CIPC and EM profile. This matches the results from the previous table. We don't want different roaming behavior for lines that are shared. The results still don't match our objectives. What should we do? We still have two choices. We can make more changes to our implementation, or we can revise our objective based on these results. Users can be mobile. If users roam to a site, then all dialing, internal and external, from speed dials and call lists works just like it does at that site. Call forwarding always works like at the home site. Can we make more changes to our implementation? It's impossible to make call forwarding behavior work like at the roaming site for CIPC or any other devices roaming with device mobility, because the roaming site local route group is not used for forwarding. We could try to make all calling work like at the home site. That means that dialing from a roaming site would work like at the home site. We know that won't work for 911. We don't see this as a good option. Our options for changing the implementation are limited to deploying E.164. This can be a big job. We'll look at this later. Are we happy about revising our objective? Does it make sense for call forwarding to work like at the home site while external dialing works like at the roaming site? That means that when roaming, if I call a number at the roaming site, when I forward calls to that same number, people calling me may get a fast busy, or worse, connected to the wrong party. But when roaming, my existing call forwarding and remote destination configurations all work. This isn't so bad. Maybe this is better. We built user training based on this implementation, and we told the users it was better. Enterprise 20 revised the objectives. Users can be mobile. If users roam to a site, then all dialing, internal and external, from speed dials and call lists works just like it does at that site. Call forwarding always works like at the home site. We'll always deploy EM profiles and CIPC together. Our cool standard licensing lets us have 10 devices per user, so adding CIPC is not an issue. EM profiles don't take up licenses. What about the issues in orange? We'll look at these issues in the next drawing after we've discussed tail-end hop-off. Coming up next, Enterprise 20 dial plan build, low-hanging fruit, presence, tail-end hop-off, and mobility. Thanks for watching, and please subscribe.